This video is going to cover the media queries and columns demo for Web Design 2. Once you're in Blackboard, go to the Demos page, scroll down to Responsive Web Layout and Media Queries, find the Responsive Demo Start zip, right-click on it, Save Link As, and this should go inside of your Web 2 folder, Demos, and hit Save. In your Web 2 folder, double-click to open the folder, go inside of Demos, unzip the Responsive Demo Start, and I'm just going to get rid of the zip file. And while I'm here, I am also going to open up the index file. Okay. So we can see there's already some content on here, a little bit of styling, but not much. So what our goal is to eventually, once the screen gets a certain size, is to introduce columns. Now, whenever you are working with different screen sizes, it doesn't mean that you always have to add columns. It's just one of the more common things that you would see on a larger screen, because once you're on a larger screen, you have room for columns. So let's first start by opening this in a code editor. So I am going to use Atom. I just right-clicked in this tab, so that way I would get the option to close all tabs. It's still in from the last demo I did, but that's okay. I'm just going to take a responsive demo start and drag that in. So now I have the responsive demo start, the new one. If you are using Dreamweaver, hopefully you know how to open that by now, but if you don't, you can always ask, but it should, if you're in Dreamweaver, it should just show up in your Files panel. All right, I'm going to double click the index.html. I'm going to go up to View, toggle Soft Wrap, and then I'm also going to open up the CSS. Okay, great. So I have those in. So there's going to be a few things that we are going to take care of here. The first thing that I actually want to do is fix the image, because the image is not responsive. So the image does not change size to fit the browser size, the browser width. So I'm going to go to the CSS, and I am going to style the image. I'm going to hit enter a bunch of times just so it's easier for you to see when I'm coding, but you do not have to hit enter or return that many times. So I'm going to style image. And again, this is going to style all the images on your page. So if you didn't want to do that, if you didn't want all your images to be styled the same, you would have to put a class or an ID on that image and then style that class or ID. All right, so to make it responsive, it has to have a percentage for the width. I'm going to do 100% width. You could make it a smaller amount if you wanted to. And then you always should have in a max width also. Reason being that if you didn't have this in here, the image would just keep growing and growing and growing to fit however wide your browser window is, and that's going to show distortion and pixelation in your image, and that's not good. So you want to find out what the max width is in pixels and put that in. Okay, so I save that, Command or Control S. I'm going to come in here and refresh. Okay, so my image gets smaller and it's going to grow just a little bit. All right, but that is now a responsive image. All right, so we could just kind of assume that we went through and we coded all this. So all of this code is referred to as the mobile code. This is the way that we want it to look in a browser window on the smallest screen size. And that's the order that you always go in. You always work your way from small to large. So you always do your mobile code first, and it will always be at the top. And then whenever you're ready for a change, that's when you insert a media query. So I am going to add in a media query here. So I'm going to do the @ media, space screen, space and space open parenthesis min-width colon, and then you have to give it a breakpoint. I'm gonna go with one that's not traditional, like not a standard device size here, and just say 550px. Go outside of the opening parenthesis and then do your set of curly braces. So basically what this media query is saying is that if your media is a screen, which it is because you're on a device. So if you're on a screen and the minimum width reaches at least 550 pixels, make any of the changes that you see within these curly braces. It's still going to do all of this stuff up here. You only put what changes down here. Okay, so let's just start with something small. So I'm going to change the background color of the HTML. So I'm going to put in a background color of, do like, I think teal. All right, so this is, this is still me changing the background color. This part isn't anything new. It just feels a little bit different because it's inside of this media query. In fact, sometimes what I tell students to do is to put in a comment saying that this is closes or closing, however you want to word it, the 550px media query. All right, so that way you know what that curly brace is for. Okay, and then I'm also going to style the body, and I'm going to tell it to have some padding of 1%. And then if I look up at the top, the body already has a width of 94% and a background color. Okay, so it's going to remember that even at this larger size. But now what I want to say is, because I'm making this body a little bit smaller, I'm also going to say, okay, well, let's center it. Okay, so this was something that we went over at the end of Web 1. This is a trick to center a block level element. So basically what's going to happen here is, because we've already put in a width and it's a block level element, doing margin and then auto for the left and the right side is going to automatically center it. All right, so I'm going to save that. So Command or Control S. It kind of jumps my code back down to the bottom. So this is all of the code right here. All right, so I've got my smaller screen size. I'm going to refresh, and then I make my screen a little bit bigger, and then you're going to eventually see the teal. Okay, so here we go. All right, so did you see the teal pop up? Kind of hard to miss, right? So that is the teal kind of being added in there. Right, and a change like that, I know it's kind of small, but sometimes that's needed. Sometimes you might be looking at your screen and you're like, you know what, I just need something here. I need something to change here. Let's take it a step further and just say, okay, maybe I want my H1 size to change. All right, so I'm going to change the font size and just make it a little bit bigger. Again, I've got more room, so I can make it bigger. Okay, so pay attention to this up here. There it goes. And it's just a little change, but it definitely gets a little bit bigger. All right, I know it's kind of hard to see because it kind of forces a return down here, but it does get bigger. All right. The next thing that we're going to do is go even wider. We're going to go even wider. Now, in doing that, I think around this size, this is about a good time to add in columns. All right, so here's where we're going to do the columns. Now, I want to point something out to you in the index. So let's jump back to our source code, our index. You're going to notice that there is a div class column. Now, they are divs, and they need to be divs because there is no heading in here. If there was any type of a heading, like an H1 through H6, then this could be a section or an article, because in order to use a section or an article, you have to have a heading inside of it. But since we don't, they're just called divs. Now, I made them both have the class called column because I want them to look exactly the same. If I didn't want them to look the same, I could give them two different class names, or I could make them IDs. All right, so basically it's saying I'm going to have a column around, so it starts right here. I will go to declare the scarecrow, something green ribbon. Okay, so this content that I have highlighted is going to be one column, and then this is going to be another column. So basically anything that you want to be a column, you have to wrap it, you have to wrap some tag around it, because you have to have something that is going to identify it as being a grouped item to be a column. Right? Same thing that, like, if you're in Illustrator or InDesign or anything, you have a text box. And in that text box, you can either say, hey, I want two columns, and it even shows you your gutters, or you do two separate text boxes. Okay, so let's jump back to the CSS. I just wanted to point that out. So that was something that you had to have in there. And I had it in there from the beginning, so that's why I wanted to point it out. All right, so let's do another media query. All right, so at media, be careful. If you hit enter here, it will add in a second @ symbol. So don't do that. All right, at media screen and min width. And then this time I'm going to do 768px. And then I'll put in a comment, closing 768px media query. Perfect. Okay, so what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to style the column. And again, if I'm styling a class, I need the dot here or else it's not going to work. I'm going to give them a width of 40%. Right, there's two of them. I want them to go side by side. I know my width can't be larger than 50% or else they won't fit side by side. But I'm going to go lower than 50% because I might want to add some margin or padding to it. So I'm actually going to do, let's go ahead and do margin left. And we'll just do 1% for now. And now I want these to be columns. So two key factors that you need in order to turn something into columns. You need a width, because it needs to know how wide to be, and then you need to tell it to float left. Even if it's going on the right side, you need to tell it to float left. All right, so let's refresh. Okay, there's the teal. And then there's my columns. There's my columns. Okay, so something weird kind of happened with this white box, right? Something weird kind of happened with the white box. Well, that is the display problem. And basically what the display problem says is that if you have a container, which is our body, that has something floating inside of it, the container stops working. So an easy fix for that is to have something clear both. All right, and that's what we're going to do for the H6. Okay, so I am going to come in here and I'm going to say H6. Whoops, I don't want it right there. I want it right there. H6 clear both. All right, I'm going to save that. Come in, refresh, bam, there it is. All right, that kind of looks odd off to the side there, so I'm also going to add text align center. There, a little bit better. Okay, so now I have my two columns. Don't worry about that part right there. We're going to fix that next. I kind of want a little bit more space between my columns, and we found out last quarter how to change something if it follows in our tag. So I want to add margin on the left to just this column. Well, they have the same class name, so I can't just do column, but I can say dot column plus dot column, because that means anytime a class called column follows another class called column. So I'm going to do that now. Okay, so dot column plus dot column. If you put spaces around the plus sign, that doesn't matter. Like if you want to do it that way, you can. And then I'll just do margin hyphen left. And yes, you could just do margin colon and then do your 4 values. That would be fine also. And 3%. There we go, just to space it out a little bit. So that's what we wanted. Okay, perfect. Now, we are working with responsive web design and we are working with media queries. Now, the only problem is that right now, the way that I have it, the index page, if you're looking at it on a phone, even if you were in a small view, it would try to show you the web page looking like this on your phone. And the reason being is because we need to add the meta viewport tag. So on Blackboard, you need both of these tags right here, meta viewport, both of them. So I'm going to highlight and copy, and then I'm just going to paste them. They just have to go somewhere between the head tag. It doesn't matter where exactly. It just has to be between the head tags. Now, it's not going to make a difference in anything we see in the browser on a desktop computer or a laptop, but it will make a difference if we are on a mobile device. Okay, lastly, what I want to do is I want to add an additional column in here. So I'm going to go to my CSS, and basically I want my columns that I have, like this column and this column, to go to the side of the image. Now, one thing that I want to point out, just so you guys are aware, I have my div class column is starting right here at the beginning of this, and then it's closing right here. And then immediately the next div class column is opening right here, and then it's closing right here. Okay, so again, you have to have something that wraps around these items in order to turn them into a column. Okay, so we have that. Actually, to tab that in, perfect. All right, so one more media query and then we will be done. Okay, so at media, and you can have as many media queries as you want. There isn't really a limit. There is, a little bit of overkill if you are doing too much, or maybe it's because you're trying to solve a solution for a problem that you created, but you shouldn't have to do too many. All right, so I'm going to style my image. The image already has a width on it, but the width is being told to be 100%. Well, if it's already 100% and there's no way I'm going to fit this 40% plus 40%, that's 180% plus all the margin that I have in there. So I need to make my image smaller. So I'm going to now give it a width of 40%. So let me explain what's going to happen. Up here, this is in my mobile code, okay, before any media query, the image is going to be 100% wide, starting out in a smaller screen. Get to a larger screen, do we tell it to be any different size? No. So once it reaches 550 pixels, it's still going to stay a width of 100%. And it's going to stay 100% until the screen width reaches 760 pixels, 768. Once it reaches 768 pixels, once it reaches, I need to go one down more. Once it reaches 960 pixels, it is going to change to 40%. All right, so that image stays 100% through 550, through 768, all the way till 960. So it's not until the browser window reaches a width of 960 pixels that it is going to change its size. All right, so again, to make something go side by side, turn into columns, you need width, and you also need float left. Float left. All right, and then I'm just going to add margin onto this as well. And then 40%, well, my image is 40%, my columns are still 40%, so that's still too much. So I'm actually going to come in here and tell my columns to be smaller. And just so you know, you don't have to name your classes column. That's just what I did to make it kind of sell home for you guys that these are columns, but you don't have to name it that. And then I'm still going to do margin on the bottom of this just to push down that H6. All right, so 40% plus 25% times 2, 50, that's 50% because I've got two columns. So that's 90%, and we still have the margin in between. Okay, so the columns are 40% here, and they're going to stay 40% until it reaches 960. Once the browser width reaches 960, then they jump down to being 25%. All right, so let's save it, come in here and refresh, see if we did what we were supposed to. Bam, there it is. All right, so here's our image with the width and float left. Here's our first column of text with a width and float left, and then here's our second column of text with a width and float left. Okay, so we have all of those things in. And just to reinforce the inspect element portion, I'm going to just highlight anywhere, like I don't even have to highlight, just right click and go down to inspect. And basically what this is doing is this is going to highlight any pieces of my code. So like right here, div class column. So you can see that whole thing is the column. If you see the orange, okay, kind of move it to the side. If you see the orange that's on the HTML part, that is showing you where my margin is. All right, so I'm going to click on this div class column, and what it's going to do is it's going to show me over here, and your CSS might be over here. I just moved mine around because it's easier for me to see it this way. So what it's going to do is it's going to tell me all of the CSS that is affecting that column. Right now, it's reading the media query, the 960 media query, to have a width of 25%. Right? If it didn't have that 25%, well then it's going to read it as being this 40%. And see, you can't do floats because there's not enough room. So that's why I do the 25%. Down here it says width 40% is crossed out because it's not paying attention to that. It's paying attention to the width of 25% right here. All right, so it's still doing the float left. It still has the margin left. It's still reading that information from the 768. It's only doing what's different, and these are the two things that are different. right? You can do that reverse by clicking this icon right here. So in your browser, you can like highlight it. Let me bring this up again. You can highlight it and it's going to, like you could, so like I can click on this image and it's going to say, oh, it's this image code right here. This is the CSS that goes with that image. Alternatively, you can also click this icon, and what this is going to do is this is going to allow you to see it in a phone view. Okay, so this is 328. If you click on responsive, it's actually going to give you certain phones to look at. Okay, so these are, or I shouldn't just say phones, certain devices. Or you can go back to responsive and you can see there's these bars here. You can actually click and drag it and you can see how it's going to look at different sizes. The thing that's also nice about this, since I have inspect up still, is I can actually see, like if you watch the CSS right now, I can see how the CSS is changing. Basically, it's telling me where the media queries are. The other thing that's nice about this too is it's telling you how wide it is. So if you weren't sure how wide, like what breakpoint you wanted to give it, you could say like, okay, once it reaches like about right here, I know that I want columns. Okay, so then you can kind of just look at your width up here. Okay, and then to get out of it, you can just hit this icon again. Now, if your inspect dialog box is kind of docked in your screen and you don't want it there, find the triple dot icon, click on that, and I just have mine set to this, to undock. But you can set yours up however you want. It's just easier for me to do it this way. All right, so that is it for media queries. The whole idea is understanding that if you want something to change at a different browser width, then you just code it into the media query. If something is going to stay the same, and most of the time like a font family is going to stay the same, the color is going to stay the same, things like that. If you want to stay the same, then don't do anything in the media query. You only put in the media query what changes. And then to do columns, to make things go side by side, you need a width, and then you also need float : left. If you want to make something stop being a column, that's when you would use clear both. Right? And that's what we did for the H6 because it was trying to float with the columns as well. Okay, as always, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask.